You're watching a Highwire Media podcast. Hello, true crime fans, and welcome back to an all-new season True Crime Never Sleeps show. This season, we're diving into some fatal fandoms when obsession turns to violence. Before we do that, give me your thoughts in the comment section below, of course, as we cover this story. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Without further ado, let's dive right in. In the golden glare of celebrity culture, fame can become a double-edged sword. On one side lies adoration, success, and influence. On the other, scrutiny, invasion, and in most disturbing cases, obsession. For Robert Dewey Hoskins, a man plagued by delusion and untreated mental illness, that obsession would turn deadly. His fixation on pop icon Madonna didn't remain a harmless fantasy. It became a volatile crusade. What began as delusional infatuation quickly escalated into threats, violence, and a nationwide legal and psychological case that exposed the fragility of the barriers between the public and the dangerously obsessed. The saga of Robert Dewey Hoskins is not simply a case study in celebrity stalking. It is a chilling portrait of a man whose mind fractured under the weight of schizophrenia and religious mania. Hoskins didn't just want to meet Madonna. He believed he was entitled to her, ordained by God, chosen by fate, and provoked by rejection. His rage wasn't random. It was targeted, unrelenting, and based on a world he had built in his head. Madonna, one of the most recognized and scrutinized performers in the world, was no stranger to fan attention. But Hoskins was different. He crossed boundaries, literally and psychologically, until the threat was no longer hypothetical. Armed with threats and later weapons, Hoskins stalked her home, threatened to kill her, and evaded authorities until the danger was impossible to ignore. Tonight, we explore the life and crimes of Robert Dewey Hoskins, examining his early descent into mental illness, the stalking incidents that terrified Madonna, the legal proceedings that followed, and the broader societal implications. While the case captured headlines in the mid-90s and resurfaced in the 2010s, its core themes remained alarmingly relevant. The criminal justice system's treatment of the mentally ill, the vulnerability of public figures, and the legal gray area that allows obsession to fester unchecked. Robert Dewey Hoskins didn't just shatter women's sense of safety, he exposed the illusion that fame protects. In truth, it attracts, and sometimes it attracts exactly the wrong person. Robert Dewey Hoskins was born in 1955, but little is publicly known about his early years, family dynamics, or formative influences. What is clear, however, is that by adulthood, Hoskins was a man in deep psychological distress. Diagnosed later with paranoid schizophrenia, his delusions were not benign. They were grandiose, dangerous, and increasingly violent. He spent years homeless, bouncing between shelters and jails, caught in a cycle familiar to those living with untreated mental illness. Friends and family, if any were still involved, had little to no role in his life. He often spoke of God, angels, and missions. He identified himself as a prophet and made erratic claims of divine instruction. These weren't mere eccentricities. His writings and statements revealed a worldview in which reality, religious fervor, and personal rage were indistinguishable. Hoskins established classic symptoms of schizophrenia: auditory hallucinations, paranoia, and disorganized thinking. He believed that celebrities, politicians, and spiritual entities were communicating with him through the television, through music, and sometimes directly through his thoughts. He didn't view Madonna as a stranger. He believed she was speaking to him through her lyrics, that her music was encoded with messages meant for him, and that they were destined to be together. Long before his name hit national headlines, Hoskins had displayed disturbing behavior towards women. He had harassed strangers, followed women on the street, and claimed romantic relationships with people he had never met. But without a consistent mental health history or guardianship, these incidents were chalked up as isolated disturbances, not as part of a growing and dangerous pattern. In retrospect, Hoskins was a ticking time bomb. Law enforcement and psychiatric professionals failed to intervene meaningfully. In part because the system is not built to detain people for what they might do. But in Hoskins' case, the signs were glaring. His language was violent, his actions persistent, and his grip on reality slipping. As he began to fixate more intensely on Madonna, those delusions took on a frightening coherence. He wasn't just obsessed, he believed he was entitled to her. When he couldn't have her, he would punish her. In his mind, their story had only two possible endings: marriage or death. By the early 90s, Madonna was a global phenomenon, known for pushing boundaries, reinventing herself, and challenging cultural norms. She was both idolized and polarizing, a symbol of strength and sexuality, and for some, a trigger for rage and resentment. To Robert Dewey Hoskins, she was all of this and more: a divine figure, a soulmate, and eventually a betrayer. Hoskins' obsession with Madonna took shape gradually. He became convinced that her lyrics were coded messages meant for him, pleas for him to come find her, love her, protect her, and punish her enemies. He interpreted her songs not as art, but as divine instruction. This belief system only deepened as his mental health deteriorated. By 1995, Hoskins had made multiple attempts to breach Madonna's LA property. Dressed in combat style clothing and often shirtless, he scaled her fences, lurked in her backyard, and screamed obscenities and threats. In May of that year, he was spotted 3 times within a span of 2 months trespassing on her property. Each time he escalated, from wandering around her grounds to directly confronting her staff. His statements were chilling. On one occasion, he screamed, "I'm going to kill her. I'm going to slice her throat from ear to ear." These were not idle threats. He carried knives and later told police that he had a job to finish. On May 29, 1995, after climbing a wall into her estate, he was finally confronted by security guard Manuel Gutierrez. When Hoskins charged at him, Gutierrez shot him in the shoulder. The bullet stopped Hoskins, but the deeper threat remained. Authorities arrested Hoskins on charges of stalking, making terrorist threats, and trespassing. Madonna, who had not been present during the confrontation, learned of the incident through security and news reports. The experience left her deeply shaken. For the first time in her career, the persona she'd built, bold, fearless, untouchable, gave way to fear. She was no longer just a performer, she was a target. Later, Madonna described the emotional toll in court. Quote, "I feel incredibly disturbed by the actions of this man. I do not feel safe. I will not feel safe until he is put away." Her testimony would prove pivotal in assuring that Hoskins was not treated as a minor nuisance, but as a genuine threat to her life. The criminal trial of Robert Dewey Hoskins drew national media attention. At its center was the question: how should the law handle someone who is both mentally ill and undeniably dangerous? The prosecution framed Hoskins as a predator. They presented security footage, testimony from Madonna's bodyguards, and recordings of his threats. They argued that his behavior went far beyond obsession. It was a pattern of escalating violence. His intentions were clear: to either force Madonna into a relationship or to kill her if she refused. Madonna took the stand, giving emotional testimony about the trauma she had experienced. Her appearance was a rarity. She described having to increase security, cancel plans, and live with the constant anxiety of being watched. "He invaded my home," she told the court. "He threatened my life. I was afraid every night that he might return." The defense didn't deny the facts, but instead pleaded for compassion. They brought in psychiatric experts who confirmed what had long been obvious. Hoskins suffered from paranoid schizophrenia. He was delusional, disconnected from reality, and incapable of understanding the consequences of his actions. In his mind, he had been chosen by God to be with Madonna. The jury was faced with a dilemma. On one hand, Hoskins was clearly mentally ill and needed treatment, not punishment. On the other hand, he had made repeated threats, committed violent acts, and had no remorse. The stakes were too high to risk leniency. Ultimately, Hoskins was convicted of felony stalking, making criminal threats, and assault. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison. However, it was later determined that he should be housed in a psychiatric facility instead of a traditional prison. He was transferred to Atascadero State Hospital, a high-security mental health institution in California. The case had ripple effects across the country. It raised awareness about the dangers celebrities face and the legal limitations in protecting them from disturbed individuals. It also led to calls for stronger anti-stalking legislation, particularly when the victim is a public figure and the perpetrator exhibits signs of untreated mental illness. California lawmakers later expanded the legal definition of stalking, allowing courts to act sooner when someone showed signs of fixated delusional behavior. The case became a precedent for treating stalking as a violent crime rather than a nuisance offense. Hoskins spent the following years in and out of psychiatric institutions. At the mental health institution, doctors tried a range of treatments to stabilize his conditions. Medication helped control his most violent outbursts, but staff reported that he often refused treatment and became combative. He continued to make delusional claims about Madonna, asserting that they were spiritually connected and that her music was being used against him by shadowy government forces. Despite the facility's high security, Hoskins attempted to escape multiple times. Each time he was caught and reprimanded, but his obsession never faded. He believed the court had wronged him and that Madonna was being held hostage by a corrupt system. In his mind, he was still the hero of his own story. Then, in July 2012, Hoskins escaped from Metropolitan State Hospital in Norwalk, where he had been transferred. The details of the escape were not made public, but officials confirmed that he had walked off the premises during a temporary supervised release and never returned. The alarm was immediate. Police issued a statewide alert. The media reignited coverage of his case, and Madonna's security team was placed on high alert. Authorities warned the public not to approach him. Hoskins is a dangerous individual. He has a history of violence and mental illness. Anyone who sees him should call 911 immediately. Madonna reportedly went into lockdown, increasing her personal security and working closely with law enforcement to ensure her safety. Fortunately, the manhunt didn't last long. Within a week, Hoskins was spotted and arrested in LA. He was taken back into custody without incident and returned to the hospital. However, the damage had been done. The incident reignited fears not just for Madonna, but for every public figure who has ever received a threatening letter, message, or stalker at their gate. It also raised serious questions about the effectiveness of security procedures in psychiatric institutions. How could a man with Hoskins' history be allowed even temporary release? How many other dangerous individuals were being mishandled by a fractured mental health system? Robert Dewey Hoskins left a legacy far more lasting than anyone could have predicted. His story has become a reference point in the history of celebrity stalking, used in legal seminars, mental health conferences, and law enforcement training. It also shifted how society views the intersection of mental illness and public danger. Prior to cases like Hoskins, stalking was often downplayed. It was seen as creepy or annoying, not criminal. But his violent threats, actions, and the ease with which he had accessed Madonna's home forced a national reckoning. Laws began to change. In California, new legislation allowed for stronger protective orders, longer sentences, and earlier interventions when clear signs of obsession and danger appeared. Hoskins also became a case study in how the justice system and the media treat mentally ill defendants. Some saw him as a tragic figure, a man whose untreated illness led to criminality. Others viewed him strictly as a predator. The truth is more complicated. He was both. His illness didn't excuse his behavior, but it did explain it. And that nuance is crucial in shaping how we prevent similar cases in the future. Pop culture absorbed the story quickly. Elements of Hoskins' stalking were echoed in films like The Fan, Swim Fan, and Perfect Blue, and in numerous TV procedurals such as Criminal Minds and Law and Order. The trope of the obsessed fan turned killer is now standard, but its real world counterpart is often more frightening, not because it's exaggerated, but because it isn't. The case also humanized Madonna in a way the public hadn't seen before. Known for her fearlessness, she was suddenly vulnerable. She spoke openly about fear, trauma, and the erosion of personal freedom. In doing so, she helped shift the conversation around stalking from shame to safety, from privacy to public awareness. In 2013, a year after his escape, the story faded from headlines once again, but Hoskins' name continues to surface in legal discussions about about celebrity security, involuntary psychiatric treatment, and the rights of victims in ongoing threat scenarios. His case remains a chilling example of what happens when obsession meets inaction. The story of Robert Dewey Hoskins is a profound profound indictment of systemic failure in mental health care and law enforcement response, and in the broader cultural understanding of how dangerous untreated obsession can become. It's easy to dismiss Hoskins as an aberration, a madman with a unique fixation, but the mechanisms that allow him to spiral unchecked are anything but rare. At nearly every point in his life, there were moments when intervention could have changed the outcome. Early signs of schizophrenia were either ignored or mishandled. His delusions went undiagnosed for years. Despite run ins with law enforcement, he was never held long enough to receive consistent care. Instead, he drifted from streets to jail cells to temporary mental wards, falling through the cracks that countless others also fall through. It was only when he threatened someone famous, someone with a platform and resources to fight back, that the system finally took him seriously. This isn't just troubling, it's emblematic of how our institutions function: reactive rather than proactive, punitive rather than preventive. Even after his conviction, the system struggled to contain him. His escape in 2012 was not just a personal failure, it was an institutional one. It revealed that even high profile cases could be mishandled due to bureaucratic inefficiency, budget cuts, and lax enforcement of protocols. There's also the question of what justice really looks like in a case like this. Hoskins was convicted, yes. He was sentenced, yes. But he was also sick. The penal system alone was never equipped to rehabilitate someone like him. It was never equipped to protect victims long term. His case lives in the in between, where crime meets psychosis, and where legal outcomes feel more like triage than resolution. The lessons here are urgent. We need stronger pathways for psychiatric intervention before crimes are committed. We need better tools for evaluating threat levels when delusion intersects with fixation. We need laws that reflect the realities of stalking in the age of social media and constant access to celebrities. And we need to stop treating mental health care as a luxury reserved for the compliant or insured. Because for every Robert Dewey Hoskins, there are dozens more like it, untreated, unmonitored, and on the brink. As of the most recent public reports, Robert Hoskins remains confined under the jurisdiction of the California Department of State Hospitals. His exact location, medical condition, and treatment plan are protected under patient confidentiality laws. However, periodic updates through legal filings confirm that he has not been deemed fit for release and continues to receive psychiatric care in a high security facility. Hoskins is now in his 60s, a man whose life has been consumed by illness and incarceration. There are no reports of rehabilitation, remorse, or cognitive breakthrough. Instead, what persists is the memory of his crimes and the enduring danger he represents. Legal experts believe that he will never be released. His history, combined with ongoing delusions, make him an indefinite threat. For Madonna, he may no longer be a daily concern, but the shadow he cast over her life remains. Security protocols born from his attacks are still in place. Her team reportedly maintains a line of communication with California authorities, ensuring that she is notified in any changes to Hoskins' status. The scars left by his intrusion, emotional, psychological, procedural, have not faded. Public interest in the case resurfaces periodically, often when another celebrity is targeted by a stalker, or when a high-profile figure discusses the trauma of being followed, threatened, or watched. In these moments, Hoskins' case becomes a cautionary tale once again. There is no Hollywood ending here, no cathartic moment of justice served. Just a mentally ill man whose delusions became headlines. A pop star forced to face mortality through the eyes of a stranger. A legal system that still struggles to balance the rights of the sick with the safety of the public. Robert Dewey Hoskins will likely die in state custody. His story will continue to serve as a warning, not just of what he did, but of what wasn't done until it was too late. And that is our season debut of Fatal Fandoms. Let me know your thoughts on this case in the comments section below. And of course, if you want to support the channel, you can buy us a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/TCNS. As always, you can find us on all major podcast platforms, Good Pods, Amazon, Spotify. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find us there. As always, thank you so much for watching and listening. We'll see you next time.